and she finally sent me an email, but I don't really understand.
Could somebody,
We are streaming live.
okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our virtual board meeting. We will start off as usual with the flag salute. Can everybody please rise? On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mrs. Callahan, if you would please do the roll call.
Certainly. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes, here.
Mrs. Weisberg, Mrs.
Yes,
Weisberg,
Beth, that's you.
Here. Sorry, my
That's
computer, my internet is still crying.
Mrs. Vase,
Here.
Ms. Brooks,
Here.
Ms. Epstein,
Here.
Ms. Gilliar,
Here.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Once again, welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. We have a pretty full agenda, so we are going to get right to it. If you've had a chance to look at the agenda before, you'll see that we have actually four discussion items, and I think we're going to be touching on issues that a lot of our community has been asking about. We'll be speaking about the budget. We'll have a budget presentation by Mrs. Callahan. We will also have an update on our COVID protocols, and there will be a discussion about the potential and the plans for returning to all-in secondary school and returning all of our students into the buildings when we think that will be feasible. And I don't want to jump the gun, but there will be a discussion about that. First item on the, and thank you for joining us, by the way. The first item now is the adoption of the agenda for tonight, March 2nd. Do I have a second? Okay, Ms. Brooks. Mrs. Callahan, can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Mrs. Johnson,
Yes, I'm here.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
thanks. Mrs. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item here is community comments. And for those who have been watching our virtual meetings, we do take live comments now, but they will be at the end of the meeting, which is normally our second portion of community comments. You can participate by pressing the raise hand button, and you will be called on and can make your comment public. You can also, if you would like, you're welcome to email the board at portnet.org during the course of the meeting if you have a question or comment you want to have read into the record. By doing that, please put in the subject line that this is a comment for the board meeting so we can distinguish it from a normal or a regular, I should say not normal, a regular email to the board. Next, we have the report of our superintendent and our enrollment report. So I will turn it over to Drs. Hines and Shields.
Thank you. Thank you, President Johnson. I'm going to actually ask Dr. Shields if you wouldn't mind to give us the enrollment report, and I'll take it from there.
Of course. So our last enrollment report was put together on February 25th. As of that day, we have 5,225 students. That's 175 students less than we had this time last year. And the breakdown, if you look at it by the three different levels, is at the high school, it's 51 students less than this time last year, and 124 students less at the elementary level. and no change at the middle school level.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Shields. Just somewhat briefly, I just want to give the community a few updates as far as where we are with a few particular items. One is we've kicked off 2 committee meetings, our equity and inclusion, as that group has gathered a few times, as well as our vision and mission committee. So we're set to meet this week as well. We're making some really nice, I believe, some inroads, getting to know each other as members. And I'm just so thankful for everybody who's contributing to these very important causes. And we'll have some great work coming forward. To our student athletes who, if you are watching, thank you for watching. And if you aren't and you're going to watch this via recording, I just want to tell you how proud we all are of you for everything that you've done over the past month for our winter athletes. Really just done a tremendous job. I want to thank our coaches for a very successful, albeit shortened season. It was great to see our student athletes participating. For our fall athletes who are out there right now, as I know Dr. Shields and I before were watching in like 20-degree weather, some of the kids in shorts, but regardless, they had smiles on their faces, as did their coaches, and we are all rooting for you. And again, we're just so proud of everything that you're doing. The last thing I want to mention before we really get into some of the discussion items, and I'm maybe a little bit premature about this. That's right, we have some county champs as well. I want to welcome Kathy O'Hara, who's on the agenda for tonight. She will be our new assistant superintendent for business come this summer. And so she'll be approved tonight. And after a long and productive search, I can honestly say we are thrilled to have Kathy join our team. And I've said it many times before, not to embarrass Ms. Callahan, but you know, she has very big shoes to fill, and I know you'll be working alongside her for, you know, a few weeks over the summer to ease this transition. So that's some welcome news. The second thing is we also welcome Lori Director, who is joining us as well as the new interim director of guidance. And we look forward to your leadership as well. And so it's been a very busy past few months. And I'm really thankful again for everybody who's participated in these committees to make sure that we have the right people here. I want to thank you all. So, and I have one more announcement to make before I stop talking. After this board meeting, after everything is approved, I'm very proud and happy to say that our very own Dr. Mioli has an interim in front of his title, and that will be dropped after this board meeting, and he will be the acting assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. So very, very happy board meeting indeed in these early moments. So congratulations to all.
I was going to make that announcement.
I'm sorry. Wish I
But
knew.
let's have a round of applause for Dr. Mioli. Very well deserved. And we're really looking forward to keeping up the excellent work that you've been doing. Thank you, Dr. Mioli.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move to accept the February 9th, 2021 Board of Education meeting minutes. Do I have a second on that? Okay, Ms. Epstein. All in favor? Ms. Callahan will take that. Roll call.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank
Okay, thank you. Now on to the discussion items. The first discussion item is the 2021-22 budget, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Callahan. You're muted.
All right. I think Here we go. I would like to make one comment before we begin looking through the actual slides. Not everyone watches every single meeting. So I'd just like to remind you of a change that's happened this year, possibly one of the positive outcomes of COVID. We used to have what was called the Budget and Facilities Committee. This year, the board made a change. All of their former subcommittees are now Board of Education meetings, and you will see that we approve the minutes from those meetings at our evening sessions of the Board of Education. This has actually allowed the board to spend many more hours this year discussing budget. And since our last evening meeting, the Budget and Facility Committee has chaired two full board meetings to discuss the budget. And so if I go quickly through this presentation, it's because this is a meeting of the board to do their work, and they have heard some of this information before. The last meeting of the public, we had discussed roof work, and the board, as of yesterday, is authorizing additional monies to be put into our transfer to capital line. And when I say authorizing, nothing is final till everything is final. But at this point, we are hoping, with the board's approval, to now set aside $2,015,000 to do roof work at both South Salem Elementary School and Schreiber High School. The hope is that with funding this type of amount of money on an annual basis, next year we will be able to do work at Daly Elementary School, as well as do work on the tennis courts and the track. So for 21-22, we are hoping to have $2,015,000 for roof work at South Salem and Schreiber. And if all goes well, in the subsequent year 22-23, we will continue doing roof work and take up other large facilities projects. Always during the budget process, there is a time when I provide at least preliminary information of our surrounding districts and where they are in the development of their budgets and their levies. As you can see, Port Washington is at 3.07. That is with this increase in the monies for roof work. And as we go further along in the discussion, we will talk about potential ways that that 3% increase will be reduced further to bring us more in line with people like Syosset and Roslyn and East Williston. When we began the process back in the middle of February, we were at a 2.72% budget increase. We spoke with the board about increasing the transfer to capital line for additional roof work, which brings us up to 3.07%. Unfortunately, we do have to consider what is considered the allowable levy limit, because that is a box the state has put us in for the last 7 years. And in this particular year, we began with an $887,000 gap because of the way the formula runs. So It's wonderful that the board is considering letting us add $571,000 additional to the transfer to capital line for roof work, but we do have an $887,000 gap that we need to eliminate before we can bring this to the board for adoption. The central office cabinet spoke, the building level principal spoke, the directors spoke. We came up with a variety of potential ways to eliminate this $887,000 gap. People may recall that we have 10 retirements throughout the district come June 30th. And you just heard Dr. Shields talk about elementary enrollment being down. And therefore, in discussion with principals, we do believe that there are at least 3 sections at the elementary level that can be compressed. And because people are retiring, no one will lose a position in doing that. And it will save us $317,000. We also currently have an athletic director and an assistant athletic director. We have had conversations with the people involved, with the superintendent and with the board, and believe that in compressing those 2 positions into one, we can save $209,000. We also anticipate some use of federal grant money in the area of special education, which will allow the general fund budget in special education to be reduced by $100,000. We do see the potential for accessing 1 middle school teacher based on enrollment. And we do see that having 3 administrators retiring come June 30th will allow us hopefully to replace those individuals with less experienced administrators who therefore would fall on a lower rung in the salary schedule. And then we do have some clericals who are retiring, folks who have been with us for many years, and therefore replacing those individuals will also provide for some savings within the budget. Now, we've eliminated the gap potentially if the board agrees with each of our suggestions, but we were also asked to determine what the cost might be if we consider that we may still be in the same situation come September. Hopefully we're not. The president is saying that we will have enough vaccine for every adult in the United States by the end of May. So I am hoping that in September, school will open as it has traditionally. But if it does not, we have to consider that this year in staffing for virtual learning and for the need for social distancing, we spent almost $1.3 million. If we need to add $1.3 million back into this budget, then our budget increase will go up by up 3.32% from the number previously shown on the earlier slide, which was 2.53%. So that is a large increase, but we have to consider whether these costs should be added. So we have virtual school costs themselves, which consist of teachers. It's all human entities, teachers, teacher assistants, remote principals, education assistants. Well, the education assistants actually go into the social distancing column, which means The students who are at home, it's almost $500,000, 478,000. And then the educational assistance and the COVID coordination and supervision that's needed at the middle school for social distancing, which we have been paying for all this year, is another $816,000. This amount has not been resolved in any way in any of our discussions thus far. And I just want to remind the board about the fund balance that the district has, because the board has been offsetting the tax levy year after year, which we are estimating that they will do again this year. But they also need to consider that we are spending so much more in our budget in the current 2021 year that we're going to need to pull some money from our reserves in order to offset any excess this year. And we have what are called restricted reserves that are supposed to be used only for the particular purpose listed, such as unemployment insurance, retirement system contributions, and workers' compensation. And then we have what are unassigned, and in total our unassigned and our restricted come to $10 million. So that's something that the board has to keep in mind as we go through the budget process. And then this is another slide that we generally provide to the board and the community, which is based on information gathered by the Nassau BOCES. And these are the costs for the 1920 school year, the school year for which these figures are available. Certainly we're in the 2021 school year, so we can't determine the total cost. The year is not yet over. But among all of these districts on the North Shore, we are consistently the second lowest and maintain that in all the years that I have been here in the school district. Certainly there is an economy of scale if you look at the difference between a Locust Valley and a Port Washington, but certainly not when you look at a Great Neck, which is much larger than Port Washington and where the taxpayer is actually paying $6,000 more per student than in Port Washington. It has always been my belief that if a resident chose not to live in Port Washington, they were still going to look for a location somewhere on the North Shore of Long Island. And if you picked any one of these other communities, you would be paying more for the education of the children in the public schools in any of those communities. And then finally, this is the same figures, only shown to you in a different visualization to see how the costs go up dramatically from here to Locust Valley. That is the extent of my presentation, and I'm happy to review any of the slides or to stop the screen sharing at this point.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Well, let's leave the screen up for a bit because I can see Deb has a question and maybe we'll need to refer to a slide, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Thank you, as always, for the presentation. I know we're just beginning in the middle. If we decide, and I know we discussed this yesterday, I just wanted to make sure I understand, and for the benefit of the people who didn't see yesterday's presentation. if we were to not increase our budget to the 3.32%, and we went with the 2.53%, in the event that come September, we decide to have some semblance of a virtual school, let's say BOCES doesn't come through and there's still vulnerable families out there who can't send their children back into a public school, whatever the reason, then that money needs to come out of our unrestricted fund balance. Would that be correct?
That's correct. And obviously, September could look different from the virtual school that we've even had this year, depending on the numbers of children who would need that. It's not for me to decide, but if you were at a situation where actually there were only a few children, the BOCES option might be better, or you certainly might be considering live streaming at that point, but it's hard to say. Yeah.
Of course, I understand, but that money would come out of the unrestricted fund. So I know that the state wants districts to keep only a certain amount on hand in the unrestricted funds. Do you know where that puts us in terms of where we should be?
Well, at the current moment, before taking any withdrawals, we are at 3.9% of this year's budgeted amount. The maximum you can have is 4%. We're at 3.9%.
Okay, good.
But that number is about $5 million, I believe. And $6 million, sorry, 6.5. And you will be using, I would safely say, be using at least $3 million, meaning you will be offsetting taxes next year by about $2 million. And very liberally, I'm saying maybe you would only need $1 million to offset your $2.6 million in costs for this year. It could be greater than that, which would then bring you down to $2.5 million, which is far below what the state of New York allows for.
You mean as of, let's say, June 2021?
Yes,
Mhm,
as of the audit that would happen for June 30th, 2021, it would take into consideration any money you're taking out to offset next year's tax levy, and it would take into consideration any money you authorize to be taken out for any overages in this current budget year.
So the money we're seeing in the unassigned balance, right, the 6,500,000 some odd, is going to drop precipitously in the next few months.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I don't know who is next, but I'll start.
Can I go next? Only because Mary has that slide up, and that's the question. I have a question on that.
Yes, you go next.
Okay, and just for the record, it's Larry, Julie, and Rachel after.
And that was the order I would go in because it's the way it appears on my screen.
Okay, perfect. So can we just go over this slide for a second, Mary?
Sure.
Because there are things that are crossed out, or I don't know if it's that way based on.
It was done intentionally.
So if you could just.
It is done intentionally because while it is the auditor's responsibility to list all the monies of the district, there are monies here that are not available to be spent. The very first line says unspendable. Unspendable for us is the first month's health insurance premium. So we have to account for it, but we're not allowed to spend it for any other reason. Then we go down to the employee benefit accrued liability, which is an interesting reserve. it is set up so that should the district almost go bankrupt, we have to account for any vacation pay for any employee who is entitled to vacation. So as of June 30th, a report has to be done saying how many people in the district have vacation days left, what is their rate of pay, and it is calculated out. So any custodian, clerical, administrator who has any vacation left, we're supposed to account for that. And our liability is actually higher than 1.765, but we do have 1.765 set aside. So you can't use that unless you write a letter to the controller applying for a waiver to use it. So that's why I made the new total for the restricted $4 million, because that's the money that you can actually touch upon if you need it for next year's budget. Then in the unassigned, it says assigned here. Those are exactly what it says, encumbrances. That meant that at June 30th of last year, we had $1,700,000 in purchases pending. So while the money was still in the bank, it was not available because we were going to have to pay a vendor that money. And then appropriated for subsequent years' budget, that $1.5 million is the money that the board authorized to offset the taxes in the current 2021 budget. So you really have no money available for you to use in that category. So you have 4 million in the restricted, and you have 6 million in the unassigned, which gives you 10 million available.
Perfect, thank you. That was good to go over because the crossing out makes it a little confusing. So the close to $3 million that we have spent that was post budget being passed and voted upon in our COVID expenses, that money is going to come from where?
That money is going to come from the unassigned fund balance.
That's 6.5 million.
That's right. And we will know better when we get into the late spring as to how much we will have under expended this year's budget. So if we under expend the budget by $500,000 and our COVID expenses are 2.6, then you will need to take 2.1 out of the savings.
That's math I could do. Thank you, Mary. Yes, I got
Yeah.
that. But the reason I'm asking is that what we as a board generally have access to is the unassigned balances, right? When we're doing our budgeting.
Yes.
And so from that 6.5 million, although we don't know what we'll underspend, but from that 6.5 million, close to 3 has already theoretically been spent, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, it's 3.5 something or 3.7, whatever the number would be, that is in our unassigned. And our transfer to capital money of 2 million is coming from, I'm fill in the blank.
I don't follow where you mean the transfer to capital.
Where does the transfer to capital fall into play? Does it, that doesn't?
The transfer to capital for next year is part of the overall budget, just as any other line in the budget would be. The money that you're taking, the $2 million that you're taking from unassigned is to offset the tax levy.
Right. Okay, so that's also coming from the unassigned. So
Yes.
thank you. Okay. I'm just trying to see that the unassigned is coming down,
Way down.
way down as we're talking, which then, and as we're thinking about other costs that we may have or other expenses that may be COVID related next year, we need to keep those numbers in mind. And that's the only reason I'm bringing that up. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Julie, and then Rachel.
But I think I was next, actually.
Oh, I'm
It was,
sorry.
I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
That's okay. Well, Emily sort of hitting on a lot of the points that I wanted to hit on. It looks like our unassigned balance might end up around $2 million next year, which I suppose would give our external auditors fits. I also suppose it would impact the interest rate we will pay on our next round of bonds for our construction, because basically we probably wouldn't have the same rating that we have because we'd be closer to insolvent. And so, I mean, it really troubles me to get down that much. I guess my question is, and I don't know if we could do this or not, but if we used some of our dedicated reserves, in other words, if we paid some of our TRS contribution with the TRS and some of the ERS with the ERS money, would that help us in the same way so that we wouldn't have to hit our unassigned budget and our unassigned? I mean, our $10 million will go down by the same amount anyway, but at least if we keep a little bit more in unassigned, we might look a little bit better. And so I'm wondering if we can do that, or if that money would not affect the tax levy and the budget in the same way.
It
Do
would
you
have
understand my question?
Yes, I do. And
Okay.
it would have the same impact. And yes, you can take money certainly from ERS and TRS, because our obligations in both of those areas are far greater than the amounts that we have in our reserves. So if you wanted to take $1 million from ERS and 500,000 from TRS, and then only take 500 from unassigned, all of those are potential ways of reaching that same $2 million number.
Well, anyway, yeah, I would suggest that you and Dr. Hines and your team look at that as a potential alternative.
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. My other thing is sort of a point in that you're developing a budget, and the budget is very detailed. But ultimately, what happens is we approve a budget and we approve a tax levy, and what happens within that budget. In other words, if it turns out that we have a virtual school or whatever, and we don't have the ability to go into our reserves to pay for it, then the administration would have to figure out what changes they're making within the budget. So now what our budget is basically aspirational. It's never exact. There are always things moving from one item to another. One category goes a little high, one category goes a little low, and we do some budget transfers here and there to make it all work out. So that same thing could happen next year, just to a greater extent, if we have $1 million unanticipated expense, for COVID, which I'm hoping we don't. Then we might have to cut $1 million in some elsewhere. And as we been discussing, our budget is almost all personnel. So any changes we do probably would impact personnel, which would probably impact the kids. So anyway, I just sort of wanted to bring that point out. We sometimes get stuck in the minutia of these budgets of what should be in what line and what should be in another line, when it's really the number. And the things change. We have our contractual obligations, and those things are there, and the rest of it is sort of a little bit more fluid. And anyway, so just wanted to make that point.
Okay, Julie. Thank you, Larry.
Mary, I just want to clarify some comments that were made from yesterday to today about the roofs, and maybe I misheard. For the transfer to capital line, the monies that we're putting in will help to offset the costs for the Salem roof and the 6 sections of the Schreiber roof. And then did I hear correctly this evening, though? You said Daly will be handled next year, right? Daly is not included in that money?
Daily is not included in that money, and in reviewing a 5-year plan with Mr. Estano, he and I have Daily in the budget for 22-23, along with the track and the tennis courts.
Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you. I had misheard yesterday, so thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Rachel.
So 2 comments / questions building on some of what my fellow board members have said. I think this slide that we're looking at now, we're all clear that these numbers are actually going to be much lower by the end of the year because we're going to have some very big expenses from COVID hitting them. But even so, I think sometimes when you have your average Joe or Jane taxpayer sitting and listening to this presentation, it's easy to think, oh, $5 million? Why do they have all this money sitting around? And why are they asking me for more money when they have this huge sum of money in reserves? So I just want to note a point that you make often, which is this is not a very large percentage of the budget, and a school district cannot budget down to the last penny accurately, and we need to have enough money to pay our bills, which is part of the reason that our auditors want us to have a certain amount of money on hand. I don't expect exact figures, but are you able to comment a little bit on the kind of reserves that our neighboring districts keep? Because I have the sense that we're getting a little low. And I don't think it necessarily would feel like that from somebody who's just looking at these numbers, which are in the millions of dollars, which is a lot of money for a family, but is not a lot of money for a school district, especially one of our size.
Yes, well, certainly at the end of each of our years in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say the auditors have commented that our end of year under expenditures is far too tight, that it's less than 1% of our monies that remain unspent. And so, as you said, this may look like a lot of money, $10 million, but I have been here for 20 years, and it's taken 20 years to build up $10 million. So that's at the rate of about $500,000 a year on average, right? And there are expenses that come up unanticipated. Thank goodness that we have the reserves we do to be able to make our all of our payments this year. But the comptroller's office also has a report that they issue to school districts each year called fiscal stress. I haven't seen ours yet for this year, but I can tell you that next year you should not be surprised when the report says you are susceptible to fiscal stress based on the points that they assign to various fiscal issues, even social issues in your community, such as what is the margin by which your budget has passed? What is the socioeconomic makeup of your community? What is the ethnic makeup of your community? But when your general fund, unassigned and assigned fund balances total, excuse me, under a certain percentage of your overall budget, that's a red flag to the comptroller's office. I would expect very many school districts, even North Shore school districts, to appear in fiscal stress next year. Relative to our neighboring districts, I must say that sometimes I am a little jealous when I do hear that over a long period of time, boards have made decisions to work with administration to build into their budgets an intended savings. We have never had the philosophy to do that here. We have never taxed taxpayers more than what we actually needed for program. And now I would say with the tax levy limit program, we don't even tax taxpayers for what we do need for program. The board has been making larger and larger contributions to offset the tax levy over the last 7 years. So we don't have a great deal of savings compared to our surrounding districts. Sorry, that was a long answer, but.
It was perfect. I think it was exactly the information that had to be shared. I do have another question, but I'll get back in line after whoever else is next.
Rachel, why don't you just finish?
I muted myself. I'm sorry. What I did say was go ahead, Rachel, and I'll go after you.
Okay. So my last was just a comment. With all of that foundation, I just wanted to say publicly that I support very strongly, and I appreciate that this budget is coming in at the maximum allowable under the tax cap. And I feel very strongly that that's where it should stay. And I think this community should be prepared that we're going to have to come in at that point for the next several years, because we gave the community a real break last year that we couldn't really afford because of the circumstances and the times. And if we want our schools to maintain the quality that they are, we are going to need to be funding them.
Thank you. And thank you both. And thank you, Larry. And thank you, Mary, because Larry, you actually covered a question that I was going to ask. And I was, it's a little, not deceptive is the wrong word, but it gives the wrong impression to see that our total reserves are almost, $10.5 million here. But it's really, there's a big difference between the unassigned and the restricted in terms of what we can do. But I'm pleased to hear Larry's suggestion that we actually use, because TRS has gone up, I believe ERS has gone up, a number of those funds have actually gone up, and we will have to pay more money into them this year. If we can dip into those reserves, which seems like what they are actually there for, that could offset other spending that could go to our operating budget. That's correct what you said before? Is that what you said before?
Yes.
I think so. And historically, we have had very much lower reserves than a lot of our neighboring districts. That's, we've always known that. But I do think, as you said, that this year, everybody's been dipping in because of the unanticipated and unfunded COVID expenses. Now, one thing that hasn't come up just now is the possibility of federal relief and, more federal aid that could offset some of this dipping into our reserves, as we say that we're going to have to do, this year, right? Would we be able to replenish reserve? Well, you can't just put the money straight into reserves, but if we know we're getting federal aid before we use the reserves, is that doable?
If we are notified by the governor that that he is going to add to our state aid flow through money from the federal government, we can do that. If the federal government decides they want to give us money, as they do in special education, which is grant money, then it's simply a different accounting method for using those funds. It would not come from the general fund, but certainly any dollars from any source will help to offset use of these reserves.
And there is a number, we always say it and I forgot, but the number beyond which you can't have, your limit, our concern is that our reserves are going to run low and we're going to be in fiscal distress. But what is that number that you can't go beyond, like 4%?
4%, yes. And there has been, the legislature has on some occasions looked at the possibility of allowing schools to legally increase that number from 4 to 6%, but it's not like anybody is going to have all that extra money this year to be allowed to have extra savings anyway.
Right. Thank you. I can't see everybody, but does
It's Beth and then Larry again.
okay.
Excuse me.
Mary, I actually really just wanted to speak for a minute to thank everybody, because first of all, for people who haven't followed our budget process, over the years, I think you'd be surprised to know that budget gap that we talked about, I think that's the smallest I've seen in my time on the board. So, they worked really hard on the very first budget that came out, because clearly the only way that we're ever getting to a gap that small is if the thought and time that went into the initial budget that came out was appropriate. So I just really want to say thank you to all of you, because I just think nobody really understands how difficult it is when you have increases that we know about, contractual increases in health insurance and in salaries based on our contracts, and in ERS and TRS and other things that we can't do anything about. And those increases, I already know for a fact, are more than our tax levy increase. The only way to get to a budget with a gap that's this small, it is through some serious, thoughtful consideration. And so I just hope the community understands that the work that went into this is really pretty incredible work. And I wanted to say thank you for that. And I really do hope everybody understands that to get to this point with the contractual obligations that we have with the retirement through ERS that are all state mandated and that are things that we really can't change or do anything about is nothing short of remarkable. And the fact that we have already closed that gap is sincerely, if I could stand up and give you all a standing ovation, I know it was Mrs. Callahan and Dr. Shields and Dr. Mioli and all of our building principals have worked so incredibly hard. So thank you. Thank you for presenting something that I'm going to be pretty proud to present to the community as we move forward. And really thank you for doing the work up front so that we're not spending a lot of time right now nitpicking through a line by line budget trying to find some money.
I second that. Thank you.
Okay, so
Larry.
yeah, so I'm still concerned with our savings going down as low as they're going to go, especially when built into our state aid number is a what they used to call a gap elimination adjustment, but now they call it, I think, the COVID pandemic adjustment, which is $1.1 million of federal aid, which reduces our state aid by $1.1 million. So next year, our state aid is going to be $1.1 million lower because there won't be any state aid. So that puts us $1.1 million further in the hole. It doesn't seem like we will ever be able to put a dime back into our reserves. And certainly with a reserve of $2 million, we can't put $2 million into capital. So we're not going to be able to fix our roofs. So the question then is, do we skate by this year and hope everything falls into place and next year we're really lucky and the feds give us $50 million? Or do we start the pain now and say, okay, we know over the next 3 or 4 years we're going to have to make some really hard choices. Instead of having a cliff, maybe we make it a slow descent. And so I just thought I'd put that out there because, you know, we keep working on budgets like we're sort of like stock traders. The only thing that matters is 1 year. But if you look at the people who are actually successful at it, they look at it long term. And I think we have to be looking at our budget in a little bit more long term. And next year is going to be 5 times worse than this year. So do we start taking some of the pain now so that the pain isn't so bad next year? Anyway, that's just something to throw out there. And of course, I really feel bad throwing it out there after you've done all of this work. But anyway, and I don't know if anybody else on the board agrees with me that we should be looking at that, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
I have a question about that. Did anybody else have their hand up? Because I don't want to be a screen hog. Okay. I thought that the money for the roofs was coming from transfer to capital, not from our reserves.
All of the costs for the budget, you have to think of it as one big pie. And when we calculated the numbers, we then came out with an $887,000 gap.
Yes.
Now, we came out with an $887,000 gap with the assumption that the board would take $2 million from reserves to offset the levy. I think what I'm hearing Larry say is, does the board really want to take a full $2 million, even though we have found a way to get rid of the 887, there is still $2 million that the board is putting into the kitty to make up the total amount of the budget along with the levy from the taxpayer. So am I correct, Larry, that that's basically what you're saying?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it would be either, I mean, basically we're spending money in 2 different areas. We're looking at the roofs, which is X number of dollars, and we're looking at everything else. And so, yeah, if we take less money out of reserves, we have to cut our overall budget. If say we took $1 million out of reserves instead of $2 million, we have to find another $1 million worth of cuts, which would probably end up being programmatic cuts. So I guess my question is it better to do $1 million of programmatic cuts this year and $1 million of programmatic cuts next year, or do $2 million of programmatic cuts next year? Because one way or the other, it's going to happen. And so, you know, I imagine people with seniors, you know, want to keep this year as good as, with juniors want to keep the next year as good as possible, you know. But the question is for the kids starting out in kindergarten, you know, when do we want them to start feeling the pain, and how badly do we want them to feel it?
Well,
because there's going to be pain.
If I could just add, there could be a natural attrition based on enrollment if the enrollment trend continues, which would be a way of reducing staff, but with a logical reason, rather than simply saying, if we're going to cut $1 million, we need to cut the value of X number of paraprofessionals, clericals, custodials, teachers. But of course, that's not for me to decide. That's a board decision. But if we see enrollment going down at the elementary level, that will continue to ripple into the middle school, just as the middle school 8th grade is the largest class they have ever had. So that is moving up to the high school, and the middle school enrollment will be slightly lower for September, which was the reason we were able to offer the accessing of 1 staff member at the middle school. So it could be a natural evolution if if you decided to wait a year and see which way the enrollment went.
I think we can maybe stop sharing screen, right?
Okay,
I don't, and Nora, Dr. Hines and Beth have their hands up.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Dr. Hines because he's a superintendent, and then I'm gonna go to Beth because she's gonna make a really good point too.
Okay. Thank you. And, you know, to Larry's point, I think he brings up some valid points. My recommendation is that we stay slow and steady as we go through this. I think what we have in front of us right now preserves the programs that we have. And if and when, it's probably more when than if, we have to make any adjustments or modifications next year, then we tackle that next year. Because we also know that a lot can happen between now and certainly July 1 and thereafter. So my recommendation is, you know, we stay slow and steady, we continue moving forward, and plan for long-term, as Larry said, because I totally agree with that, but let's deal with what's in front of us right now. And that is, in a very, very difficult year during this pandemic, preserving the programs that we have for next year right now.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hines. Beth?
I think Dr. Hines, basically, we're gonna make, I'm gonna make a very similar point. I hear what Larry is saying, and I've been watching and doing this for a while now, through the tax cap, and I have seen us cut, and I have seen our reserves go down to a point where we are being classified as susceptible to fiscal stress, and I've seen us recover from that, and I've seen us build the programs back, and I just personally don't see any benefit to eliminating until we have to. And I don't see any benefit to worrying about what may or may not come beyond planning. And I think the vision and mission work that's coming over the next year is going to let us do some planning that we haven't been doing, that I do agree with you, Larry. That stuff is critical, right? We want to know where we want to be in 10 years because it's very hard to continue to move forward until we know where we want to be in 10 years. But I also don't want to say that, you know, we're not going to get there because of A or because of B, because we have all seen us sit here when we have cut guidance counselors and librarians and programs down to the bare minimum and say, well, there's no way we'll ever be adding. And then a couple of years ago, that's all, you know, for the last few years, that's all we had been doing was adding. So we had been adding, staying within the tax cap and rebuilding our reserves all at the same time. And it's been pretty, you know, so it's doable. So I don't want to continue. I agree, Larry, but I think our achievement gap has grown because we haven't necessarily focused where we need to focus. I think that's where stuff like this vision and mission work will allow us to strategically plan to appropriately place our resources that in a way we may not be doing. But it doesn't mean that we should be cutting now so that at some point in line, I don't believe cutting anything now is going to put us in a better position at some point down the line. I don't believe that to be the case. And I don't believe that's the right course. I believe giving the kids the best that we can as every year that we can do it makes the most sense because we all lived through that 2008 rug pulled out from underneath us. And we did have to, you know, feel some pain, significant pain from that. But I don't think it would have been any better if we had a little bit of that pain for the few years leading up to it. I don't think those kids would have been better off. I don't think any kids would have been better off. And so I think, you know, if we can continue to run the programs that we have and stay the course while our administrators do some really tough, and our community members and our teachers, if everybody can really start to take a hard look, I think that this budget that we are presenting, right, that not we are presenting, that has been presented to us as a board is giving us an opportunity to let Dr. Hines and Dr. Shields and Dr. Mioli and our building principals and our teachers who are participating and Dr. Allen who is participating and our new ENL director who will be participating, really work on analyzing what we have and finding a path forward and charting a plan. And it'll let us sit here next year at the same time, looking at that plan and making good decisions based on good data and based on things that we decided before, decided that were priorities for us before we started the budget process. We tend to start the budget process and determine our priorities as we go through. And I think determining our priorities first will help drive the budget process. And I think that that's going to be a better way to do it. And I look forward to that. So I really do believe that the budget that we've been presented gives us that year to do that hard work. And I think we kind of need to continue down the road of giving giving our kids the best that we can right now, because we don't have a plan to change things and we don't have a plan to close that achievement gap right now. So let's develop one while we still offer what we think is the best that we can, and we have a plan. Continue, like I said, I just think that we're in good shape to continue. So I again just want to reiterate, I think this is exactly the budget we need at exactly the right time.
Thank you, Beth. Well said. Anybody else? Or shall we move on? Okay, we are going to move on. The next item is the district-wide safety plan, and fortunately, we can knock that item off very quickly. The news is that it's been posted on the district website for community comments, and there are 30 days. The community can, it's been up for a while actually, but community comments will be accepted for the next 30 days. And it's actually very much the same plan that we've had before, although there are, I'm not sure how many pages, but there's a number of pages that have been added because of the COVID situation. So the district plan now includes measures for COVID safety. It's a plan, by the way, for those who don't know, that we work on with BOCEs, and then we have to submit to SED. And as I was saying, it's going to be posted for 30 days. And at the conclusion of those 30 days, and with any revisions that we make, we will then, it will appear on an agenda, and presumably the board will approve it and it will go to SED. If anybody has any questions specifically about that, I see Deb does, yes.
I was just trying to find it on the website and I couldn't. So if we're asking for people to be able to make community comments, do we know where on the website it is?
Well, I have not looked for it, but we could definitely get that clarified and make sure that by tomorrow it is prominently displayed. If it isn't already, but I know you're pretty.
Yeah, no, I just notated that, Nora, so I will make sure if it's clearly, if it's not front and center, I'll make sure it is by tomorrow morning. Thanks, Deb, for pointing that out.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, next item, and this is an update. This was requested by the board, and our administration graciously accommodated that request, and we're now going to have an update on the, well, it's actually an update on building COVID protocols, because we're at the halfway mark for this year, 2021.
Yes, so for those of us who remember at our last board meeting, the Board of Education asked district office to look into two items. The first one is President Johnson just said, building COVID protocols update, to make sure that the protocols that we put in place, that we have in place since the beginning of the year, to revisit them and make sure that our staff and our committees have met. So Dr. Shields, if you wouldn't mind, because I know that you spearheaded this over the past several, well, I would say at least the past week or so. If you wouldn't mind just giving us an update as far as what the process was and what the conclusions were. I'd appreciate that.
Of course. So just as a refresher for members of the community, we have a committee structure that's in place for our entire district to reopen this past September. And that reopening committee is still actively meeting every Tuesday afternoon to review issues as they come up. Many of the administrators and educators around the district are on that committee. Also, as a subcommittee of that committee is the Building Protocols Committee for the entire district, which is headed by Bonnie Cohen, the Manor Haven principal. Reporting to that committee are the building protocol committees from each of the 7 schools. So following the board meeting that we had last, and the request was made to review our building protocols, I went back to the reopening committee, to Bonnie Cohen, and to all of the building principals, and told them that at this point, middle of the year, it's time to review our building protocols. And to no surprise, their response was, you know, we're doing that all the time. And of course, I realized that, but I wanted them to take a look at it through a slightly different lens, which is, here we are mid-year, and is there anything we would say that we want to do slightly differently now that we're here, for example, in the middle of winter? And we've been doing these protocols every day for a series of months. So each of the building protocol committees at the 7 schools met, and I thank all the administrators who lead those committees and the teaching staff and the support staff that are on those committees. And they sent me an update on their review of those protocols. I have summarized that for you in a memo, which I sent to you this evening. And I have continued to talk about those building protocols with our reopening committee as recently as this afternoon at our 3:30 meeting. So to share with you just a couple of the highlights of the review. For example, one of our elementary schools needed to modify its building protocol around recess while there's lots of snow on the ground, because they know how important it is to get students outside in the fresh air for things like mask breaks and free play, even while we have this amount of snow on the ground. So they modified their recess schedule so more classes could get out more regularly on the blacktop that was available to them. Another elementary school came up with a 1-page summary of protocols that they then disseminated around the entire building as a refresher mid-year for all of the staff as they implement the protocols. One of the elementary schools took a look at how many people were eating in the faculty lounge, and they modified the number of occupants downward from 12 to 10, for example, to maximize the social distancing as more people were using it than previously. And finally, I would share with you that as one of the committees was looking at the transitioning from winter to spring, there was the revisiting of the concept that we had in the fall around classes outside under tents, and making sure our tents are ready for those classes to be outside as soon as the warm weather is allowing it to happen. And that was specifically in a conversation around music performances and being able to get musical instruction outside where a greater distance is expected for social distancing. So these committees that are in our 7 schools will continue to meet. They'll continue to give feedback to the reopening committee. And I just wanted to let you know about how that process takes place and that it is well underway on a regular basis. And we welcome the opportunity to give you this feedback here mid-year.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. Questions from the board? Okay. Thanks again. We will move on to our 4th discussion item, and that is, well, it's listed as secondary students full return, and we'd like to, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hines for a discussion about the issues involved with that goal, I would say.
Sure. No, thank you. So let me start with, I know there's a lot of chatter, not just here, certainly I would say across Long Island, about the potential of bringing secondary students back before the end of this school year. And so just so the board knows and the community knows, I've been speaking with Dr. Pernick and Ms. Javelin about, what that could potentially look like and what are some of the things that we would have to contend with in order to do so. So those conversations were really taking place before the board asked, and I just wanted everyone to know that. But listen, since the last board meeting, I've met with my cabinet, with Dr. Pernick and Ms. Javelin. And, under the current DOH guidelines that we're following, the fact of the matter is we don't have the space to bring all our students back. Now, the only way we would be able to bring all our students back at the secondary level, just like our elementary schools, plural, is if we purchase desk shields. So in order for that to take place, we would need to purchase them and then secure them to the desks, all the student desks at Weber and at Schreiber. And over the past month, like I said before, we've had some preliminary conversations about the possibility of bringing just our seniors back and the potential to bring our 8th graders back. And I think we can understand, what that rationale is. We have our, seniors who will be exiting and graduating, and then we have our 8th graders who are leaving Weber to move on to Schreiber. Now, as far as doing that, we have to understand too, and I think Ms. Callahan said this before, we have this 8th grade class that is almost 100 students more than the graduating class. This is a large class compared to our Schreiber population. But the fact of the matter is, whether we just bring our seniors back or 8th graders back, we would still need to purchase these desk shields, and it's expensive. I know we just spent almost the past 45 minutes to an hour talking about expenses and how much that impacts us, whether it's this year or next year. But if we were to purchase them this year to use, let's say in the spring, that would cost between $190,000 to $200,000 just to purchase desk shields for Weber and for Schreiber. So if the board was agreeable to moving in that direction, then of course we would, as Dr. Shields just talked about, we would reconvene our committee structures that we've had and discuss with our reopening committees and our building meetings. And we would, in my recommendation would be to go slow and steady with this. But there's a lot of conversations that would need to take place, of course. And it really starts with what are the current guidelines that we would have to follow. And the bottom line is, because we don't have the space, that we would have to purchase the desk shields. So I guess in short, that's what it would take to bring our secondary students back.
Nora, you're muted.
Thank you. Emily, then Deb, then Larry.
Thank you. Thank you for looking into this. I appreciate, and I know you were working on this beforehand, but thank you for letting us know. So the purchase of the desk shields would be for every single desk, that it would cover basically all the students at Weber and at Schreiber, correct?
Correct.
And your thought process, and again, process here. So process for you would be get approval from the board to purchase the desk shields, and then bring back the committees being the building committees. Which committees are we talking about?
So it would be initially, it's the committee that met this afternoon with Dr. Shields, is the reopening committee, the one that meets every week. And then the Schreiber committee, and then of course the Weber committee as well.
Right. So bring back the reopening and the Weber and Schreiber, and have a plan put in place to bring in, optimally you would recommend the seniors and the 8th graders, and then gradually assess, I guess, and then and look to see if we could ultimately get everybody back in by the end of the year. Do you think that that's something that is doable, provided nothing goes wrong? I mean, I don't want to, I know you can't really predict this, but your recommendation is to initially start with the graduating classes.
It would, it would. And then, you know, as you said, of course, to assess where we are, but you know, when we look at these desk shields and not knowing, because we have to think about September, right? And what this
That was my
looks
next
like as
point.
well. Sure.
So-
So this investment just wouldn't be for, you know, the remaining 3 to 4 months. It's really looking at September and beyond as well.
So that is my next point. And I think, and I want to just marry this point with going back to our budget discussion and talking about the budget that we are planning for. And we highlighted that there's $1.2 million in expenses that we put into 2020 that was being taken out because we're planning based on 2019 numbers, right? So, but I think realistically, I don't think anybody believes, whether we're all vaccinated or not, I don't think anybody believes that we're going to open up 2021 the way we actually physically looked in the buildings in 2019. I think we all are probably can be assured that we're going to need the desk shields. I think we're still going to need the social distancing next year. I think we're still going to need the masks. Like I can't see us going from where we are now to all of a sudden in September, we're back to normal. Maybe in the middle of the year, but I can't imagine. So I think for us, it would be wise if to spend it now and prepare now and have a goal now to get in as many students as possible, if only for the simple reason of practicing what it's going to look like, so that when September 2021 comes, we can hit the ground running. So my opinion is that we move to purchase the desk shields and continue with the process that you're recommending.
Thank you, Emily. Deb is next.
Okay, thank you. So I'll preface this by saying that I want all the kids back in school. I really, truly do. So in order to get there, my question about the desk shields is, are you proposing the desk shields because that is the guidance from the governor? And the guidance is recommendation, it's not a mandate, but because it's a recommendation from the governor, or because we believe that the desk shields are scientifically valid instruments that are as effective as we know masks and social distancing is effective. In other words, let me put it this way. If the governor said, science shows the desk shields really don't help because the particles are aerosolized and the mask will catch the droplets, but if you sneeze or talk, it seeps out the sides and eventually goes into the ambient air anyway and is carried around by the airflow. And so the desk shields may prevent the virus from going forward, but it's not going to prevent it from wafting into the air like smoke and eventually filling up the room anyway. If the governor were to say the desk shields don't work, would we still buy the desk shields? That's my first question.
Sure. So let me answer that, and not be tongue in cheek about the governor. But in relation to this, if the governor says that, then he should change the guidelines that all school districts have to follow, because the only reason why we would do this is to follow the guidance that has been given to us. It's the only reason why. It's the only way we can make it happen with the guidance is to have these desk shields. Now, I mean, scientifically proven. I think most of us here would agree with what you're saying. Sure, it would stop it from moving forward straight, but of course it can go over the desk shield. But I have to say, Deb, with the protocols that we put in place at the elementary level, couple, with the hand washing and of course wearing the masks and the desk shields, and some of those desks are closer than 6 feet. It's been working rather well. And so is it completely 100%? No, but I want us to make sure as a school district and for our student safety that we're following all those guidelines. That's the only reason why.
I understand, and I'm not sure I know which is effective, more than the mask and the social distancing, but I'm not qualified. I'm just simply asking the question, do these things work? And if they don't work, why are we doing it? That's the only reason I'm asking. Why do we need to spend money for a desk shield for every desk if right now we're just trying to bring in the rest of the 8th graders and the rest of the or bring them all in at the same time?
Yep. So because we can't predetermine where all the seniors are going to sit, and then some of them are mixed classes. So, we've had that conversation, or do you just give the seniors the carrying desk shields like they do in some school districts? We don't feel like that's a good idea. And to be honest with you, some of my colleagues I've spoken to, I think they wish they were secured as opposed to them carrying it around. So, yeah.
Okay, and I understand that you're in just preliminary thoughts about this, but has any thought been given to allowing the students who prefer to stay hybrid to stay hybrid? I ask this only because I know in Belmore Merrick, the students have been all in since the beginning of the year, and those who wanted to be hybrid could be hybrid, and those who wanted to be fully remote could be fully remote, and those who wanted to be full in were full in. So I was just wondering if that was going to be part of the thought on this.
The thought is it wouldn't be like Belmont Merrick, but again, we're in the embryonic stages of really fleshing this out. But for me, it seems like it's either you stay remote or you come to school, and certainly our students would have that choice. But again, we're in I can't even say preliminary stages because I want to make sure that I have direction from the board to know what direction we're going in.
Any more questions, Deb, or can I move on?
I can wait. I'll wait. I
Okay.
answered questions. I'll wait my turn to the next round. Thanks.
I didn't want to cut you off. Okay, Rachel.
I think I was next.
I don't think
Oh.
I was next. I think everybody else was ahead of me, actually.
And sometimes I forget about you, so I wanted to really make an effort to bring you in.
I appreciate it.
So,
And also the people that have the board background, I find it harder to see the hands from where I'm with the lighting. Okay, Larry.
I'll take my background off and show the moon instead. Well, I know there's one major obstacle to this plan, and that's called lunch. But I think optically, it's great to bring back the 8th graders and the 12th graders. I'm not sure that's the best educationally. There are other districts that are prioritizing ENL students. There are other districts that are prioritizing special ed students. There are districts that are prioritizing the at-risk students who are struggling in school. There are certain people who, everybody suffers from remote education, but some people suffer more. And I think if we're going to bring people back, we should be concentrating on the people who are being hurt the most by being remote, not just saying, oh, well, the seniors deserve a chance to have a school. And we really don't care what happens to the 9th grader with the D average. And so I do think we really need to look at that from a more, from an achievement gap point of view. I mean, okay, we don't have our mission and vision, but I don't think any of us are happy with the achievement gap. So I think even though we haven't decided that that's what we're doing, I still think we have to look at it. It is one of our goals for the year. So I'd ask that you look at it more carefully to see who would really benefit from coming back to school rather than who looks the best coming back to school.
Thank you for that, Larry. I think if I can interject, I think that's an excellent point. I don't know if one obviates the other, though, and maybe it is possible to bring back the seniors and bring back the groups that you were talking about at the same time. Okay, I know, Rachel, you were not next.
I think it's either me or Julie. Maybe Julie knows which one.
It's Julie, Beth, and Rachel. And then you, Nora.
It's actually Beth, Rachel, Julie.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Let's spend a lot of time deciding. Okay, Beth, Rachel, and Julie.
Okay. I just wanted to, Larry, first of all, I completely agree with that statement that although I do think bringing back the 8th graders and the seniors, but you and I always stand, the kids that need to be in school the most are the kids that need to be in school the most. And those are probably our kids that are disadvantaged in some way, shape, or form, whether it's our ENL students or our special education students. I'm sure Dr. Allen could speak to how difficult it is for any of our special education students to do remote learning. It's just not, it's not reasonable. It's difficult to support them. It's probably causing a lot of stress for our staff trying to support them. So bringing them back would be good for the staff, and I would absolutely advocate to do that. That said, I believe that buying these desk shields is the next step. Deb, not because, I do think that I do agree with everything that you said about the efficacy of them. However, it's the guidelines. Right now, we can't bring them back less than 6 feet apart unless we buy the desk shields. And you know what? It may not be the case a month from now or 2 months from now or 6 months from now, but right now it's the case. And we've made a lot of decisions and done a lot of things based on whatever was the guidance at the time. Good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, we fund a lot of things that we don't think is appropriate. There are an awful lot of, including when we'll talk here, there are an awful lot of really stupid unfunded mandates out there in the world of education that we know are not necessarily the best thing for kids, but we fund them because we have to. And this is falling for me in line with the we have to. And I think we have to do this. And I think continue the conversation about bringing back the kids that really need to come back. I think we should bring back our 8th graders. I think we should bring back our seniors. And I think we need to have further conversations about those other students, because I do think we are not whole our duty to serve our students the best that we can unless we have that conversation about those kids that we know for certain. I don't even think there's a debate that those kids have to be back in school full time as soon as is humanly possible. And I'm guessing that Dr. Hines is not going to disagree with that. So that's my 2 cents, but I think the first step is we need to approve the spending for these desk shields, because we can't move forward with anything without them, just because that's what the state has decided to put in the guidelines for now.
Thank you, Beth. Julie. Rachel. Okay,
So I'm of 2 minds about this whole thing. I mean, I think that everybody could agree we all just want the kids to be back in school and learning as normal, right? Everybody can agree on that. That's not controversial. That's what we'd all like. And doing something to make that possible for the people who are in a transition year is something that's hard to disagree with. What I'm stuck on is the price tag, and $200,000, though it is a small portion of the amount that we've paid on COVID precautions so far, is still a sizable amount of money in a time when our budget is tight and we don't know what next year is going to look like. That's 2 teachers for a year. But I guess I look forward to seeing what the committees have to say about this. To me, the timing of this doesn't totally make sense to me, because we're so close to the point where every adult in the United States will be vaccinated. It seems like it's very late to make this expense now to bring them all in. But on the other hand, this has been a moving target all along the way. And maybe this is the point where we think that we could potentially do it. So I guess the thing that I would ask of you is it possible? Is there an avenue for us to reach out to New York State to find out if there is going to be any change in the guidelines? Because a lot has changed since they issued these guidelines. And I think Deborah's summary of the science of the situation was accurate. Everybody's using these desk shields, but I think most people think the masks are doing the majority of the work at this point, not the desk shields. And it's a lot of money for something that is window dressing, albeit window dressing that we have to put up because the state is demanding that we put it up. I'm just wondering if there is some other legwork that we could be doing quickly, because I understand you want to move forward with this before the school year ends for these children, to see if there is a way to petition New York State to make a shift to what is required before we have this expense.
Okay, thank you. Julie. I took my hand down, so there's no question there.
Okay, well, Emily has her hand up because she wants to respond to what Rachel, but I can respond, Emily. Okay, so just the last point that Rachel made about is there anything that we can do to New York State? I will say from the legislative task force committee that we have been meeting with Senator Kaplan, with Assemblywoman Gina Saletti. We are meeting with Mr. Swazi. We are meeting with our local representatives coming up in the next 2 weeks. And at the end and during the conversation, we are advocating for that. And we are stressing that we need to have that information sooner than rather than later so that we can budget accordingly. So we are currently as a board doing that work. And we will continue to advocate and continue to ask for that so that we are not caught in the position that we were caught in last year. Now, granted, I don't know if it's going to make the guidance come any faster, but at least as a board, we're asking that question and we're making it well known around the state of New York that Port Washington wants guidance now. We don't want it in August or September when it's too late. And we would love it now because we can budget accordingly. Emily, do you want to fill in where I left off, where I missed? No, I covered that. Okay.
No, that was what I was going to say about the advocating, but what I think Rachel's saying about it's state education that came with the guidance and has the guidance changed. And I think we did ask the other day when we had this conversation, did the state education guidance change? And it has not. It's still saying that we have to have the barriers if we're not going to be 6 feet. So at this point, I respect what Rachel is asking about, spending money and what if the guidance changes. But at this point, if we want to get our kids back into school this year, then we can't wait for the guidance to change because we know how fast state education works and how fast anything in government works. So, that's what I was, but.
Right.
Thank you both. By the way, I didn't mean to undersell the legislative task force. I know that we have been doing a great deal of advocacy.
Yeah.
But I think, I meant specifically for these stupid desk shields, right? Which is a lot of money to spend on something that nobody thinks is necessary any longer. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be in violation of anything.
Right.
Although my follow-up question would definitely be asking our attorneys what the consequence of that is.
Right.
So, but that's not a topic for public discussion. Thank you both.
So I put my hand was actually raised for another reason. And I just kind of want to hopefully hone this whole conversation as I understand it, kind of back to where we are. So as I see it, Dr. Hines, is you're really coming to the board today because this is our job to say, we want to start getting students back into school and we don't want to start getting students back in. We don't want to wait to begin this process in July like we had to last year. And part of the first step of this embryonic process is put the desk shields on. Now, granted, there is an expense and it is expensive and we don't know, right? There's all these questions of whether it works or doesn't work. As a board, though, if we're ever going to have a time to spend money and have it potentially reimbursed because it fell under emergency preparedness or it fell under COVID pandemic, this is the best fiscal year to put that money into our budget and not wait until next year, because this is the pandemic year and we know that for certain. So first and foremost, as a board, I would recommend that we take that consideration when spending money. Secondly, this is just the baby step one of looking at reopening school. And as was presented, it still has to go to committee. We have to look at transportation issues. Once you start bringing all students back in, putting more students on more buses may have a fiscal consequence, right? How are we feeding them? Things of this nature. So instead of starting this process in June, whether we get this, hopefully we can get students back in before the end of this year. But at least we're starting this process so we can definitely get the students back in by the fall, is how I see this process. Am I misunderstanding that, Dr. Hines?
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. You know, the charge was secondary students full return. What would it take? This is what it would take. And, you know, to answer, actually, you know I've been using Thought Exchange for quite some time. I would like to see how many of our students would actually come back. We don't even know if they're all come back. But the reality is we can't do anything unless the board gives me some direction with this, so I can engage in these conversations with our teachers and everybody else and our administrators.
I had my hand up for a while, back and forth. Mike, when you say with this, you're saying with this meaning with the death shields or
Correct.
with something else? Okay.
Yep.
Because I mean, Larry put in the chat box, and I do agree with this. I'm not sure that nobody thinks that death shields are use. He's not sure that it's sort of a double negative. I think he's saying that there may be somebody out there who thinks that death shields are useful. And I could be wrong about this, but my experience just watching, you know, the COVID protocols roll out, there's very few protocols that roll out that actually roll back. I think more protocols get added. Like we know, of course, a lot more now about it being airborne and droplets and circulating through the air system. And we knew some of that going, you know, forward last summer. You know, we got the HEPA filters, we know about ventilation. But say with respect to surfaces and like cleaning surfaces all the time. I mean, my understanding is that yes, a surface can be a transmission, but the transmission through the air is a much greater vector, is a much more likely transmission. I don't see, and you know, time will tell, but I don't really see Governor Cuomo or anybody else saying we decided that death shields don't work, because death shields have been working. I don't see them pulling back on that for a long time. I don't see it as something that, I see it as something is necessary now if we want to go ahead with our plan. So that's kind of the answer. But I could be wrong, but I don't personally see, like, come September, there's going to be an announcement like we decided that as long as you have a mask 3 feet, or you don't need social distancing if you're wearing masks.
If I can just add real quick, and I know Rachel and Deb want to say something real quick. We have 4 months of school left, 3.5 months of school left. By the time we order these shields, by the time they come here, by the time we secure them, we're talking April. The weather will get warmer. I want to have kids back in our schools if we are able to do so. I think most, I can't speak for all parents in the community, I think the parents would want to see that as well. And as long as we do that in a safe way where it's inclusive of listening to the people who work here and they're part of that process for this, I believe, you know, if we can do this, then let's make it happen. The longer it takes for a decision, and I'm not trying to pressure anybody, I'm just saying the longer it takes, the less time that we have to plan.
Okay, who's first, Rachel or Deb?
I think it was Deborah.
Okay, thank you. So I understand you've come to ask us for approval and that you're then going to go out and buy the desk shields, but what would stop us from reopening for all 8th graders and all 12th graders? Or I guess alternatively, has there been any feasibility study done to see if the buildings can handle these extra kids, if the hallways can handle the extra flow, if well, as Larry mentioned, lunchtime, although hopefully people will be eating outside, but on a rainy day, I mean, is there any possibility that we approve this money, you go out and you buy the desk shields, and then for whatever reason, the committee and administration decides we can't reopen the building to the 8th and 12th graders?
So yeah, in my meetings with the principals in our cabinet, we can for the seniors. It'll be more difficult for our 8th graders, but you know, we know Beth will work her magic and we'll make that happen. That's for seniors, that's for 8th graders. Okay, so if we're talking past that right now, I can't answer that conclusively. But I can tell you right now for our seniors and for our 8th graders, yeah, we believe we can make that happen with the shields.
Rachel.
So Deborah just asked what part of my question was, because at this point I was a little confused about where we stood on these things, because it sounded like we hadn't done that stuff. But if we're sure the 12th and the 8th graders can get in for all the other reasons that Julie was just mentioning might be problems, that's you know, a different consideration. My other question is, do we actually know when the desk shields would arrive? Because my biggest concern is, I think what Deborah was getting at too,
Yeah.
having this expense and then having it for no reason. And are we talking about it for the spring, or are we talking about it for the fall? Because given the last year that we lived through, as far as I'm concerned, there's a million years between March and September, right? We had no idea what September was going to look like last
Correct.
March.
Yeah.
We didn't even know what September was going to look like last August completely.
Yeah. True.
So buying them for September, although I appreciate the argument that it's better to have it in this year's budget, buying them for next September is less persuasive to me. Are we sure they're going to get here in time and that this plan can be rolled out this spring? Do we know timing?
Yeah, my understanding is that we can have them within a few weeks, and we know spring break is coming up. So, you know, and again, I haven't met with the committees per se, but as far as the timing of the purchasing of this, yes, Mary and I spoke to Jim Restano, and we believe we can get them within a few weeks.
Okay.
Larry.
So again, I'm just like incredibly disappointed that all we care about the seniors and the 8th graders, and that with no thought at all is being given to the at-risk students. And it's disappointing that that's what our administrators came up with, and that they didn't look at the people who are struggling. And it's the same thing when we had to make a choice this year. We took away the non-mandated AIS. You know, we went after the at-risk kids rather than the entitled kids. And I think, you know, and I think that that's a real failing on the part of our district. And I'd like to know the rationale behind deciding on 12th graders and 8th graders over special ed, ENL, and struggling students.
Our special ed students are in right now.
Only self-contained.
I know,
right?
but we're talking, you're talking at risk in very general terms, and I just want to be specific about it. So we're talking about self-contained kids are there for sure. And Larry, I'm not opposed to, you know, bringing some of the other students who may be struggling, but the rationale for our seniors, and again, we have seniors who are struggling, so it would definitely encapsulate, you know, some of those students as well as our 8th graders. But listen, this, like I said before, these are preliminary conversations. These conversations haven't really taken place at the committee level. These were just preliminary. But it's hard, not that I would even want to argue, because it wouldn't make any sense that our most vulnerable population shouldn't be in school. But a starting point, and this is a starting point, we're just looking at, in very simplistic terms, even though nothing's simple about this, is our seniors and 8th graders. But I'm not saying that we wouldn't, you know, rule out our ENL students and special ed students.
I guess I'm just sort of disappointed that that wasn't the first scenario. Let's look at the people who really need it and figure out how to get them in and then move into the other people.
I totally get it. The first scenario was looking at space. I mean, that was really, that's really where we started, but I understand what you're saying.
Emily and Beth.
Beth goes first.
Thanks, Sam. I would just, Larry, like to say that while I do agree with you, I certainly would like to look at our resource room kids, our ENL kids. And I do believe that our administration can still do that and perhaps bring them all back too at the same time. But that said, I want to point out the social and emotional toll that this takes on kids who may never have or know that they have no having back. And so when we talk about at risk, we have to talk about the risk that is too on the mental health of a student who, spent the last 12 years in school with his best friend and hasn't been able to go to school with his best friend for the last, however many months, and would like to do that at some point before they move on from here. It makes it very difficult for those students, especially our seniors, to get closure. And so I do think that they are truthfully looking, that these kids are actually really also at risk, and giving them something to hope for is a big deal. So it's not, I would hate to continue to refer to them as our most entitled. They are not our most entitled. I think seniors have lost more. This year, seniors have lost more than any group of students throughout this pandemic. They have lost, in some cases, 2 real sports seasons. They have lost their shows. They have lost their performances. They have lost any time to spend as seniors. Last year as a parent of a senior, I saw how painful it was to lose some of it. These kids lost almost all of it. And I think we have to take a deep breath, whether I feel the same way about 8th graders, I don't know that the toll is quite as great, but I think the mental health toll on our seniors is just something that we cannot really fully comprehend. And to give them an opportunity for closure, I think is critical. I really do. And I believe that they perhaps in our school district are the most at risk right now, and the ones that we really should be focused on. So I just wanted to say, I believe, that at risk encompasses a lot of different things. And if we're looking at the psychological risk that some of these kids are at, our seniors are probably taking the biggest hit right now.
Thank you. Emily?
I just want to bring us all back because I think we're having a philosophical discussion, and I think the conversation that we asked the administration of, the ask that we had was, is it possible to bring our secondary school students back in? The administration came back to us and said, the way that we can bring them in is by you, BOE, approving a $200,000 expenditure for desk shields. That's the way they can bring students in. The recommendation from the administration is that we start with our seniors and our 8th graders. Dr. Hines did point out that they are looking at the inclusion. There is already, I guess Dr. Allen has been looking about bringing kids in with the inclusion classes. So I think our task as a board is to say whether or not we're all on board, no pun intended, on the $200,000 spend. I think we all know, and we all have said that the goal is for everybody to get back into school, whether it's everybody by the end of this year or being prepared for September. So I think we've gotten a little distracted. I think the question is, are we all on board with a $200,000 expenditure to start the ball rolling? And we need, and have the administration do the best, right? So I just wanted us to.
It's on the agenda, and we're going to find out as soon as we get to the agenda, to the action items, really.
So it is just right. It's an item.
It's an item on the agenda.
Right.
And in fact, I can pull it out if people want. And I see Rachel has her hand up.
I have one more question. Do we know among these populations of students, how many want to come back more? And the reason I ask that is because I understand, like, anecdotally, that there's a large percentage of kids at the high school who are doing remote a large amount of the time. So again, all my questions are aimed at spending the money to get them in and have everybody be healthy and safe and happy and in school is an easy yes for me. But spending the money to no end when we don't have that extra money to spend worries me. So I saw you shaking your head, Dr. Hines, but I'm not gonna. I'll let you respond. And if we don't know, can we figure it out?
Yeah, so we don't know. We haven't surveyed the parents as far as how many of our students would come back, but
The board did receive an email today that we were asked, Rachel, you just reminded me when you said that. We did receive an email today by a parent who also happens to be a teacher who wanted it to kind of be put on record that she has 2 students, an 8th grader and an 11th grader, and they want to come back to school. And so I don't know that I read the email.
So anecdotally, we now know that there are at least 2 who want to come.
There are at least 2, right?
Very scientific.
We have received
others.
other emails, but today we all got an email that said, I know you're going to be discussing this tonight. I want you to be, put it on record that my children want to come to school. So
I hope she's watching, and if not, I'm going to tell her she should watch the live stream. Watch the recording of the stream.
So,
You got a shout out.
she did. But it's on record. The reality is, no, we don't know how many, Rachel, as far as how many of our students would come back. And let's just say, and this is a hypothetical, but let's just say 3/4 want to come back. And maybe that gives us more room to bring back other students, having those desk shields. Like I said before, if we are targeting the seniors, seniors are in mixed grade level classes. And so the need to put these desk shields up, we can't just put them up in some classes and not others. We have to put them everywhere. So that is part of this. But again, to Emily's point, in order for us to get this ball rolling, I would need to know where the board stands.
Any other questions about that before we move on? It's getting a little late. These are extremely important discussions, though, so I'm not trying to rush anybody, but if there are no, was that a hand up, Julie? Yes, okay.
I was just going to say quickly, I'm assuming as we're moving forward on this, that this is going to be a discussion item probably going forward at our board meetings as more develops, things of that nature, right? I mean, this is just the beginning of this process. So this is not the first time or the last time we will have this conversation. It will continue moving forward at future board meetings.
About desk shields or about?
No, about bringing secondary school in and back into the reopening of school. That will become more of a normal part of our dialogue on every agenda. We had a little pause for a while, right? I'm just saying updates on it will be on our agendas.
Yes, I think that's
Sure.
Yes, definitely.
Rachel, do you have your hand up again, or did I forget to lower it? Okay.
I actually just wanted to add a thank you, since I've now asked you, 14 tough questions, not quite 14, but I'm grilling you on this, but I really appreciate what you're trying to do. And I agree with everything Beth said about these kids being at risk in a different way. Unfortunately, I think you could make this argument for a lot of our kids. It's been a really, really hard year for kids. And I think having them back in school, back physically with their teachers, to whatever extent we're able to do it safely, is a wonderful ideal. And I'm glad that you're continuing to push towards doing that, because I think that's important to our community and important to the health and well-being of the kids. I understand why the administrators are starting with this idea of the 8th graders and the 12th graders too, because although this has hit a lot of children hard, and certainly special needs children very hard too, I understand where you're coming from on this. I think last year, the kids that I felt the most sorry for were the ones who were in these transition moments, who never got closure. The 5th graders who never got to say goodbye to their elementary school and never got to graduate. The 8th graders who never got to graduate. The 12th graders who didn't get to graduate and didn't get a prom and didn't get all the milestones that they had been looking towards for 4 years. So thank you for continuing to think about the children and what is best for them and how we can make things as normal as possible and give them the best education we can.
Thank you.
Larry.
So as to be a broken record, the people I feel most sorry for are the ones who are getting D's and F's on their report cards, even when they're in school. And now they're expected to do even better when they're not in school. And those are the people I feel most sorry for.
Larry, not to quibble with you, I agree with you, right? Of course, we want to take care of all of our students and we want to worry about our kids who need extra support, but I think that's an all the time issue. It's not even just a
Right,
pandemic
but if we have to give for once in our existence, it would be nice to give the support to the people who need it most first, not have them be afterthoughts, not say, well, gee, after we get in all the seniors, we'll see if we can get in the ENL students. No, we get in the ENL students and then we see if we can get in the seniors. That, for the reason we have such an opportunity gap is we've always prioritized them. Everybody's equal. Some people are more equal than others, and they've always been the ones who haven't been more equal.
For the record, I trust, Dr. Hines is saying our ENL students are in. I really trust our administration to take a look at this and figure out where we should be deciding who goes in next, assuming that we can add more children. And look, all of these groups are important.
And am I correct in the decision here is that you're going to look beyond the 12th grader and the 8th graders to see if we can add additional students that are of high need or high risk or less opportunity?
Yeah, so first I need to know if we're going to move in this direction. Then I will convene the committees to come together, and then we'll figure out as far as how many kids, because as I said before, we're not starting in 5th gear. We're going to start slow and steady as far as bringing our students back and then assessing along the way. And to Larry's point, which, I hear you. We will start with our vulnerable populations as far as when we could bring them back all together. So, but first is we need to know if we're moving in this direction, and then Dr. Shields and I will get to work.
Okay.
But then you'll need to buy desk shields for those kids as well.
We're buying for
Be for everybody.
The desk shields are for everybody.
everybody.
Every single student.
Yes.
Every single desk, Deborah.
Okay.
Desk.
Okay. All right. My bad. Thanks.
Just a clarifying question. It's every single desk at the high school. Is it every single desk at the middle school as well?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, even though we're only aiming at bringing 8th grade in now and they're not mixed grade classes there as much?
For now, correct. Yes.
I think, Rachel, the idea is to get the approval to spend the money. And if they decide not to buy, it's easier not to, they can choose not to. But I think he's looking to have the approval so that we can move forward, so that they can make they have the greatest ability to make whatever decision it is they need to make. In other words, they don't have to spend the money if next week the governor says no more desk shields. We don't have to buy them, So I think at this point, we're giving approvals to give them the flexibility, just as we have done throughout this pandemic, to make decisions as they need to. Dr. Hines, is that where you're sitting here?
Correct.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
my understanding was we were going to buy the desk shields to suite so that we could have them, by the end of March, so they could be installed by the time spring break is over. So I'm
Well,
sorry, I'm confused now
No,
when this purchase is happening pending board approval.
the purchase would happen, first of all, yes, we would like to purchase this sooner than later, but I need to convene everyone. So we know which populations we're targeting. This is becoming way too complicated. We're way more complicated than it needs to be. In order for us to bring, again, I'm going to go back to the agenda, to bring our secondary students back, we have to, because of the guidelines, purchase desk shields for every single desk that is in Weber, every single desk that's in Schreiber. We would begin with a subpopulation of the schools, whether it's our seniors, whether it's our 8th graders, whether it's potentially for inclusive settings, but that's where we would start. It's the purchasing of the shields, put on the desks, the the potential target would be, because if we have these desk shields, let's say by the end of March, they would be secured before, actually after spring break is over, that might be a target date. But I can't say with certainty it would be until I meet with these committees. That's what I'm saying.
I didn't mean to make it confusing. I was hearing two different things. I was hearing you saying we're going to buy these desk shields, and I'm hearing Ms. Weisberg say we might not buy the desk shield. So that's why I got confused. That's all.
Okay, Rachel, do you have your hand up or is it up from before?
Well, I'm still confused, or now I'm really confused. So the desk shields are definitely going to be ordered, all of them for every desk, not piecemeal. We're not going to order what we need right now and then think about ordering more later. Is it one big order that happens immediately and then we're going to figure out the rest of it afterwards? Or is it that we're going to order as we need it?
So in order to bring our kids back, because of the way our seniors are in class, and with our 8th graders as well, we would need to put them in all the classrooms, but the target would be to bring all the kids back at some point. So whether they all come back this year or we begin next year with everyone all in, I believe we're still going to need those desk shields based on the guidance that's currently there right now. So again, my recommendation is if we order them all now, how do I at Schreiber just pick and choose where those shields go? You can't do it, again, because they're mixed classes. And so looking at Weber, my recommendation would be for all of Weber to have all of those desk shields there as well. So it doesn't mean I'm going to order them tomorrow, because again, I still want to have conversations with the committees. But again, in order for me to order them, I would need you to say yes.
Okay. I think I got it. Pretty sure I understand the issues. Anybody have any questions? I don't want to shut it down, but I would like to move on if we can. Okay. I'm hoping we don't have any other discussion items here, do we?
I don't know. That's it, I believe.
Well, I'm sure that I didn't waste time on an opening. We would be like at 10:20 now.
I'm
Okay,
ready.
committee reports, and no need to really go too long on these reports. I'm just suggesting. Policy and personnel.
Okay, we met on February 10th. Welcome to Kathy O'Hara and Lori Director, who the board will approve by unanimous consent, I believe, later on this evening when we get to that. And thank you very much to the administrators who worked, because we know for a fact worked very diligently to make these wonderful choices. And so we reviewed several policies. The most important ones are the social media policy, which we have on for first reading. We brought back 1400, which was basically a chain of command to emphasize that social media is not the appropriate place to post a
what?
Deb is frozen, so she
I know.
finished her update. Next.
Sadly, it's not. We're going to do it like a Mad Libs and everybody can just fill in the
I
word.
swear I didn't do it. I didn't freeze her. She's gonna have to come on and off. Why don't we go to the next? Why don't we go to the next?
Okay, we're gonna go to budget and facilities, and when Deb defrosts, we can go back.
I like the defrost comment. I will be faster than anybody. Our last meeting was Monday. That meeting, you heard everything already today, so I do not need to reiterate what happened at that meeting. Our next meeting is March 15th at 1 p.m. I hope to see you all there so that you can continue to hear the plans for the 2021-2022 budget. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb, are you back? No, she must have signed off and signing back in. Okay, Rachel, curriculum committee, please.
We met on February 24th, and the subject was assessment. We were joined by several staff members, including Mr. Scully and Mr. Pinellas, to talk about digital portfolios. And we had a renowned speaker in the area of digital portfolios, Mr. Nigajula, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It was an interesting discussion and presentation. I urge you to watch it on live stream, and we will be meeting again on March 24th.
Okay, thank you. Safety and substance abuse. We do have a little bit of,
Deb is back. You want to go to Deb?
oh, you lost your turn. No, go ahead, Deb. Deb, do you want to continue? You got cut off somewhere.
No, I was done. I said, if you're so inclined, wear green, stay safe until then. That's all. I'm good.
Oh,
I think
okay.
we missed most of that,
Not
Deborah. We
us,
didn't hear a lot of it.
say it.
Okay, when is the next?
There must be something wrong. Yeah. Oh, the next meeting is March 17th. Wear green if you're so inclined.
Oh, okay, I get it now. Why the green?
Oh,
Okay,
got it.
the connect. Okay. Wear green on March 17th.
If you're so inclined, yes.
Okay, the diversity committee, on a safety and substance we're up to. I skipped you, Julie.
That's all right. So safety and substance, a silent
have a
committee.
report.
Yeah.
We have a report of sorts.
Yes, it has been a silent committee until now. We are having, I have been named one of the chairs, as has Nick Stratweiser, and we will be meeting on April 6th from 9 to 10 a.m. as our first meeting of the year to brainstorm and plan for the upcoming year.
Excellent, and thank you. Okay, diversity committee, we have a meeting this Friday. Our meeting from last Friday had to be rescheduled. And I believe we will be discussing an update on what's happening with the equity work with NYU Metro and some other interesting items. So I do welcome everybody to join us. The link will be on the website. Legislative Task Force, okay.
Yes,
A lot of
thank
work.
you. Legislative Task Force has been very busy. As Julie mentioned earlier, we met on February 11th with Assemblywoman Gina Saliti. We met on February 18th with State Senator Anna Kaplan. We did what we presented, both of them was the result of our change.org campaign of getting ports fair share of funding. Thank you to the community and thank you to everyone who helped support that campaign. I think we collected close to 2,500 signatures. We gave all of that information to them, and the basis of our discussion was really to talk about the way the budget overview for 21-22. We talked about how the fact that our again, I don't know if we want to get into a budget discussion again, but that our foundation aid that was put in the preliminary budget that we have, right, the state aid numbers that we have from the governor has remained flat. We talked about how there was a new category that was being put in as service aid, and that was kind of clumping in categories that in the past were reimbursable based on expenses. We're worried that if that happens going forward, that would then put us at a disadvantage next year. We talked about our initiatives with that we're doing in Port Washington, our digital divide initiatives. We talked about mental health and the need for funding for mental health, especially in light of the pandemic. And most importantly, one of our bigger asks was, as we mentioned before, that we get reopening guidance sooner than later. We talked about the money that we spent in COVID-related expenses and how unfair it is for us to kind of get last-minute guidance and maybe making us change the way we're operating. So that is an ongoing discussion. They were appreciative, both were very appreciative of all of the information that we gave them, especially Assemblywoman Salidi, since this is her first term. And so, she got to know a little bit more about Port Washington, although she lives in Port Washington, but about our school district. We are meeting this Thursday at 11:15 with Congressman Tom Suozzi. And we are meeting on March 11th at 10 a.m. with Nassau County Legislator Delia DeRiggi-Whitten. The purpose of those meetings clearly are to basically continue our advocacy on getting clear guidance, specifically with our Nassau County Legislator. The guidance needs to be we want to talk a little bit more about the Department of Health of Nassau County, since we have been getting a lot of guidance from them, or we've been told that we need to follow a lot of their COVID rules, obviously, right? So we also want to talk with Congressman Suozzi about the federal funding and all the federal mandates. We are going to use as the opportunity, and I know we'll discuss this a little bit later, to discuss with him the mandate of testing for our students. So those are our meetings. We're very busy. We're advocating. The link is going to be on the website. It will be a webinar. Everyone is invited to join. I think I said everything. If I didn't, Larry or Julie or Deb or anybody, just you can fill in. But we've been very busy. Done.
Thank you. Very comprehensive. Thank you. And very fast. Okay, the next item is the calendar. The calendar is ready, and I believe we are we going to set on the actual agenda to vote on tonight? I don't recall if I saw it there. I know we talked about it. Or it's going to be posted. Okay, excellent. Any comments about the calendar from anybody? Good. I mean, speak up if you want to, but good. Okay. Action
Can I add
items.
one very fast comment? Because I think
Sure.
it's the case for all of us. I just want to
Yeah.
note for everybody that Juneteenth has been added to our school calendar for this year because it is now a state holiday. And I think all of us are pleased to see it added to our school calendar and recognized.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes. Okay, the action items, I'm just going to pull out a couple of things before I do the consent agenda. And for those who have the agenda in front of them, well, items 12.1.2, which actually goes on for several pages in the agenda, have to do with the upcoming budget vote and trustee vote. And before we vote on it, I just need to mention here that what you see here needs to be slightly amended. What it says in section 1 is that the board is going to conduct a public, will conduct a public hearing at the Paul D. Schreiber High School, 101 Campus Drive, Port Washington, New York, zip code. And we are adding to that or virtually as may be appropriate. So the public hearing, which is scheduled for May 4th, which is a requirement, and we have it every year, a certain amount of days before the actual budget vote. That will, at this point, we can't say for sure whether it's going to be live at the high school in a, in-person meeting, or whether it will be virtual as we're currently have been meeting. So that adjustment will be made. So when we vote, we are going to be voting on the language that I just said. And that language appears again in like one paragraph down, and it's another paragraph regarding notice. And again, it's just a question of, we are not sure at this moment whether we're going to be meeting in person at Paul Schreiber for that May 4th hearing, or whether it will be virtual. It will depend on where we are at that point. one other minor change, and it's not really minor, but it is a typo. And it is that the community will be electing 3 board members, not 2. And elsewhere, it does indicate that there are 3 board members, current board members, whose terms have expired. And I'm one of them, and our seats are up or open. And those board members are Lawrence Greenstein, myself, and Elizabeth Weisberg. So there will be the 3 incumbents, as I understand it. We are all running again, and I understand that there will be challengers to that. And in one place here, it does refer to elect 2 board members, but it is actually 3 board members for clarity purposes. Okay, so that's one item that I wanted to just pull out and clarify. I just want to, item 12.1, I believe it is, 0.5 still, is the item regarding the vote on the desk shields. So I don't know if I need to, I don't know if I need to pull that out as a separate vote. Perhaps I will. Okay. But the other items I want to highlight are that I want to thank the McVeigh family and Penta Communications for a very generous donation of $10,000 for fiber optic cable and technical services to the district. I'd also like to thank the Gawley family for the donation of a Jugs pitching machine to be used by the baseball and softball programs. And again, the generosity of the community is really wonderful. And then there is also a generous donation by the Health family of a clarinet and some other musical equipment and attachments to that clarinet, and some other items that sheet music, etc. So thank you very much to the Health family. And I do believe that is it. Pulling out item, I'm gonna pull out item, I just want to make sure what number it is. 12. Bear with me for 1 second.
Nora, are you pulling out the desk shields?
Yeah, if I need to, I'm not sure.
You might want to just ask the board if anybody needs you to pull it out.
Does anybody need me to pull it out? Excellent. Okay. I just wasn't sure. I am going to make a motion to adopt items 12.1 through 12.6.2. Do I have a second? Ms. Bays. Ms. Callahan, could you please do the roll call?
Yes. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes, but do we need to put the calendar in there as well, or is it somewhere within 12.1 through 12.6?
I think
could I finish the vote and then?
I'm sorry, yes.
Need to go back. Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliard,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Does anybody know exactly where the calendar is in the consent agenda?
It's a item number 11.1.
Yep.
Well, then I would have.
11.1 is not an action item, right? So do we have to vote on it separately?
So we'll just do a separate vote.
Yeah.
On that, okay? Make
Do
a
we have to vote?
motion.
Do we have to vote to approve the calendar? Yes, okay.
We do adopt it every year.
Yeah, we adopt.
So I don't know if we have to, but we've been doing it.
Okay. I'm now going to make a motion to adopt the proposed teacher's calendar for 2021 to 2022. Do I have a second?
I have a second. It's the school calendar, right?
Well, it says here proposed teacher's calendar, but it is the school calendar.
School calendar, yeah.
I'm
Second,
just-
Mary,
Just everybody say yes. Yes.
Ms. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on item 13, which is board policy. We have a number of policies that are up for first reading. That is policy 1130.1, board member conduct on social media, policy 1400, chain of command for public complaints, and policy 2410, policy development, adoption, implementation, and review. So they are just up for first reading, and we're on notice of that. Old business. New business.
I just have a quick, well, it's not totally quick, but I do have some new business. Any friends attention to the federal government and the actions that they've taken over the last couple of weeks in education. The federal government has decided that they are not granting ESSO testing waivers this year, unlike last year. This is, I believe, fairly detrimental to the students of our school district and all of the students in New York State. And in order to advocate for change, I believe we are, or I would like the board and the administrators to advocate to direct our federal elected officials. I've composed a letter that is basically, it's late and we've been here a long time, so I'm not going to read it, but it is asking them to consider all of the reasons why testing students in the middle of a pandemic. And the primary reason is just because, as we've talked today, our students have had so little of that precious in-person time with their teachers that to take even a moment of it away for testing is just not reasonable. It's just not reasonable. So I am proposing that we as a board agree to send a letter that you've all seen copies of, and we will post on the website for the community to see a copy of, appealing to our federal officials for Congress to act and through congressional action give us waivers for the ESSA testing requirements for this year. I just like a general consensus if everybody's on board, and I will get this letter to Dr. Hines's office for his secretary to put on letterhead and send out. So is there anybody opposed, or does anybody have anything they want to say?
It's an excellent letter, and I thank you
And Dr. Hines?
You and Deb for drafting that letter. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, Deb, thank you very much for putting this together. And I want to thank the board for being proactive in doing this. The bottom line is New York State, the state education department applied for a waiver and it hasn't been granted. And the president made a promise that this wouldn't happen, and it's happening. So I applaud this board for taking a stance on this. And I think you know where I stand.
Okay, good. So it will be posted for people that are watching. It'll be posted on our website. Okay, now.
Thank you.
Now the last item is community comments, and we have a 3-minute limit. Unfortunately, if you're watching this live streamed, you won't be able to, but those who are still on the webinar, if you have a question, you just have to press the raise your hand function, and I'm not sure who's monitoring it, but I believe, I guess.
Emily and I are both looking.
Oh, you're still here, okay. I mean, I know you're here, I was looking at John. Okay.
No, Nora, Emily and I have it.
Great, thank you. Okay, are there any community comments?
Give people a minute to raise their hands, but we don't have any raised hands. They're all tired. They all went to sleep and forgot to turn off their cameras. No, there's no community comments.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody. This is one of our longer, but I would say quite a productive meeting. So Thank you, everybody. And for those who are watching and stuck with us, thank you. Long night. And we will see you soon. I think we'll see you soon.
March,
Trying to-
March 23rd, next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting is March. Okay. Yes. No, it's not more. I know we had rescheduled the next week because we did this one as rescheduled. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
How many folks were on the meeting? Do we know?
30.
Thank you. Okay, good night.
Good night.